everybody. My name is Darryl Onay, and I'm the music director of the Victoria Symphony Orchestra. And I'm here to give you a preview of our second concert of the season coming up this October. And it's part of our season-long theme of the Russian and German romantics. So we'll be exploring composers, mostly German and Russian, although we'll have a couple of other ones as well. And we'll be exploring their music, and especially the romantic music, and what really makes their music what we call romantic. Now this program has 4 pieces on it and features a slightly smaller orchestra than some of the bigger ones that we have used in the past and that we will be using later on this season. And there are 4 different pieces on it. There are some Russian pieces on this, which I'll get to in a minute, but let's just talk about the first half of this program. We are going to be starting with a piece by Respighi, and it is called Ancient Airs and Dances. Now Respighi loved to take ancient medieval tunes, in this case lute and guitar music, and he would take these themes and he would recast it and reorchestrate it in his own way. Now, Respighi was a romantic composer. He was born in 1879 and died in 1936, so he was known as a masterful orchestrator. You may remember that last season we did his famous Fountains of Rome and Pines of Rome, which were tour de forces of orchestration and romantic, lush writing. Well, in this case, Ancient Airs and Dances, he wrote 3 different sets. He called them Set 1, Set 2, and Set 3. Set 1 and 2 are for a smaller orchestra, but Set 3 is unique in that it's only for strings. And that's what we're going to be starting out of this program with, the Ancient Airs and Dances Set 3 by Respighi. And the tunes are these medieval lute tunes. So, for example, in the second movement, we have this set of tunes by a composer named Basardo. And this tune is called It Is Sad to Be in Love with You, and it kind of goes like this. Kind of sad, isn't it? And that's the viola playing it with the cellos playing chords underneath it. And so he has some tunes like that. Also, here's another one. It's called The Skiff of Love. And he wrote this for luscious strings. Sometimes he would pluck the strings pizzicato or kind of strum them like a guitar. There are 4 movements to this piece, and they're all very different, but they use the strings in several different ways. And divisi, where the first violins are divided into 2 parts, and the other strings as well. Lots of chords, but all keeping to the original lute songs. So it's beautiful. These ancient lute melodies and the wonderful way that Respighi scored them for string orchestra. So we'll be starting out with that piece. It's a wonderful work, and I'm looking forward very much to performing it. After this, still on the first half, we'll be moving to our concerto. We'll be featuring a piece by Tchaikovsky. It's called The Variations on a Rococo Theme. So, like Respighi, he takes a theme that is not his own and casts it for cello and for a small orchestra. Now, an interesting thing about the history of this piece, Tchaikovsky wrote it for a cellist named Fitzhagen, very well-known German cellist. And so he wrote this piece for him and allowed him to be the one to premiere it. It's a piece with a theme and with 8 variations on that theme. Now the trouble is that Tchaikovsky was having some problems, some personal problems that he had to attend to. So he had to leave in the midst of writing this piece and giving it to Fitzhagen. So Fitzhagen took it and did a small private performance of it, but he wanted to make some changes, so he did. He changed some dynamics and put some repeats in. But he also started to do some other things. He took the variations and he started changing the order of the variations. And by doing that, he changed the keys, and he came up with several problems, which he managed to solve just by eliminating music. So he eliminated the 8th variation altogether, and the 3rd variation was at the end, and he put it more towards the middle. So he changed everything around, so it was almost a completely new conception of the whole piece. And he performed it, and he went to the publisher, Jurgensen, Tchaikovsky's publisher, and told him that all these changes were authorized by Tchaikovsky, even though no such thing had happened. And so what happened was it was published in this different form. And when Tchaikovsky found out about it, he was just livid and angry about it. And Jurgensen tried to sway him a little bit and say, well, you know, I agree with you, but still it was published in this form, in the piano cello form, and then later on published in full score. And when it was coming to the publication of the full score, still in this Fitzhagen version, Tchaikovsky just had enough with this cellist friend and said, just let it stand as it is, and I don't want to have anything to do with it. So that's the form in which it was published in the score, which is the one score that is used pretty much all the time. So when cellists perform this piece, they are not performing Tchaikovsky's original of this piece at all, but they're performing Fitzhagen's version of Tchaikovsky's variations on a Rococo theme. And even though Tchaikovsky didn't like it and he didn't authorize it, he really did authorize it in the sense that he just threw his hands up in disgust and said, just let it stand as it is. So ever since then, including this weekend and probably any place else you hear this piece, it'll be performed in the Fitzhagen version and not in the original version by Tchaikovsky. So an unfortunate turn of events for Tchaikovsky, but nonetheless, it does have the familiar Tchaikovsky orchestration, the familiar wonderful themes and harmonies that he wrote. And in some ways, I think Fitzhagen actually improved on Tchaikovsky's piece with the order and making it so that it really does have a wonderful ending to it, and the movements are a little bit more varied as they go from section to section. So one could make that argument that Fitzhagen didn't wreck the piece, but he actually did some more interesting things with it. So in any case, we'll be performing that piece as the second on our first half, and then we'll come to intermission. And now on to the second half of our program. As I said before, this is the Russian and German Romantics, but we do have a couple of other nationalities that are involved. In the first half, Respighi, the first composer, he's actually Italian, and of course Tchaikovsky's Russian. But on the second half, we're going to be starting not with a Russian or a German, but an American. For those of you who came to our first concert of the season, you'll know that we started the concert with a piece by an American composer, William Schumann, then followed by Rachmaninoff and Tchaikovsky, two Russians. In this concert, the second half, we start with a piece by an American composer, probably the most well-known of American composers, Aaron Copland, and we'll be doing his piece, Appalachian Spring. And that's probably one of his more well-known pieces, and it's a very, very simple kind of writing. He uses American folk songs in it and tried to create that sense of Americana, and it's very cleanly written textures and very simple harmonies. Just take the first 7 or 8 bars of the piece. It's very simple. Simple, right? See how simple that is? Just A, and then A major. All A major for the beginning. And then that curious sound. An A major chord and an E major chord at the same time. creates this really pretty chord and keeps that open texture to it. And Copland was a master of creating these wonderfully beautiful sounds with just the simplest of chords. It starts out softly and then it gets quicker, and you have the famous, that's the one everyone knows. Oops. And then, as the melody, this, A flat major, then G major, F major, E major. So we have A flat, G, F, E, just descending major chords. But like this. So once again, just 4 simple chords, but Copland changes it, starts it from the bottom, moves it up, and plays them one after another, broken up instead of as single chords, but as separate notes, and creates this wonderful kind of melodic line out of 4 very simple chords. And of course, everybody knows the famous shaker melody that Copland used in his Appalachian Spring. And that gets played as a variation towards the end of this piece. Again, all these very simple melodies, not very complicated harmonies, and yet he creates this beautiful sound to it. One last melodic element that you'll hear quite a bit in this Appalachian Spring is this, let me find it here for you. Here it is. So beautiful, and yet the main tune, as beautiful as it sounds, if we take out those chords, you get this. And it's separated by 2 octaves, but if we bring them together in 1 octave, you'll hear this. That's so pretty, is it? If we put them together, separated by 1 octave, by 2 octaves, by 2 octaves with some additional notes into it to make it a nice full chord. And it makes it beautiful. Very simple. You'd think that that dissonant sound would be awful, but he makes it beautiful. And that was the strength of Aaron Copland. And then finally, we'll come to the very last piece of this program by a Russian, this time a Russian a little further in time, closer to our time than Tchaikovsky, and that's Sergei Prokofiev, and it's his classical symphony. Now, Prokofiev wrote 7 symphonies, and this first symphony is the one that's totally unlike any of the other ones. Prokofiev was a contemporary 20th century composer, and so he wrote with a lot of huge orchestras and lots of times very biting kinds of melodies and dissonant harmonies. But the classical symphony was very different because Prokofiev was a composer who always composed at the piano. And then one summer he decided that he was going to attempt to write a piece without the use of a piano. And if you're a composer that needs this to work everything out, it's sometimes very difficult to just sit in a room without being able to hear anything and just write it down on paper. But he wanted to do this as an exercise for himself, so he did. And he decided that to make it simple and not too difficult, that he'd write it in the style of Haydn. So the symphony is not very long. It's about 15, 16 minutes to perform in 4 movements, and it has very clean textures and has a very small orchestra. Only 2 of each wind instrument, 2 trumpets, 2 horns, timpani, and strings. So no trombones, no big percussion, anything like that. No harp, no piano, like he would in all his other symphonies. And this one very clean and very clear. And so he wanted to make it very clean and came up with this piece. And it's a delightful piece, wonderfully catchy melodies, and as you can imagine, very clearly orchestrated because he couldn't work out complex harmonies. He was trying to just hear clean and simple melodies and harmonies, which is what he did with this particular piece. And it became very popular because of that, but it doesn't get played as often only because it is a very virtuoso piece. The writing for it is very difficult. A lot of things are very fast. The winds have all kinds of very quick figures with difficult articulations and difficult fingerings that make it very hard to play fast. The string players also have a lot of very, very, very high, quick passages with lots of jumps from one note to a higher note and down to a lower note. So it's very difficult that way. And because it's so cleanly written, like in the style of Haydn, Mozart, it's very easy to hear when something's wrong and something's amiss. Whereas in a very big, romantic, thick orchestra where everyone's playing, it's sometimes you can get away with not quite getting everything clearly together. But with this piece, it becomes evident that if there's something out of place, it's evident to everybody that there's something wrong. And so it's a very difficult piece to put together. But that being said, it's a challenge, and I think that's what makes it more difficult for everyone to perform. But we are going to be tackling it, and that's the piece that we'll be ending this particular concert with. So, our concert this coming October, Victoria Symphony Orchestra and the Victoria Fine Arts Center, the Russian and German Romantics, pieces by Respighi, by Tchaikovsky, by Aaron Copland, and also Sergei Prokofiev. We'll look forward to seeing you at the concert hall.